On the 20th of May, 1521, on the walls of Pamplona, a French cannonball shattered the leg of a vain Spanish soldier. It was the best thing that ever happened to him, because the man they carried off that wall, on a stretcher, a swordsman, a brawler, a courtier, obsessed with his own glory, would rise from that bed and build one of the largest religious orders in the history of the Catholic Church. This is the story of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the soldier who founded the Jesuits, and it is the story of every man who ever needed a second start. He was born Íñigo López de Loyola in 1491 in his family's fortress house in the Basque country of northern Spain, the youngest of 13 children, and nothing about his youth suggested a saint. He was a courtier and a soldier, and by his own later admission a vain one. Fine clothes, long hair he was proud of, a sword he was quick to draw. As a young man he was hauled into court for brawling. He dreamed the dreams of his age, honor, glory, great deeds, and a great lady watching him do them. Then came Pamplona. In May of 1521, a French Navarrese army came against the fortress, and the garrison saw the odds and wanted to surrender. Íñigo talked them out of it. He would not lower the flag, so they fought, and in the bombardment a cannonball took him, shattering his right leg and tearing the left. And here is a detail worth sitting with. The French so admired the courage of the man who had refused to surrender that instead of finishing him, they set his leg and carried him on a litter across the hills to his family's castle at Loyola. The surgeons there had to break the leg again and reset it. He endured it without a word. And when it healed crooked, a stub of bone jutting below the knee, where a courtier's tight boot would never fit, he ordered them to saw the protruding bone off. No anesthesia existed. He did not cry out, not for God, for vanity, so the boot would fit. The leg ended up shorter anyway. He would limp for the rest of his life. Now God had him where God could finally speak to him, flat on his back, going nowhere for months. Íñigo asked for the books every soldier of his age read to pass the time, tales of knights and romance. The castle of Loyola had none. It had exactly 2 books to hand him, a life of Christ and a book of the lives of the saints. He read them because he was bored, read them again, and in the long hours between readings he daydreamed, and being a man of discipline, he began to watch himself daydream. 2 kinds of dreams ran through that sick room. In one he did great deeds of arms, and won the admiration of a great lady. In the other a stranger thought arrived. What if I did what Francis of Assisi did? What if I did what Dominic did? Both dreams thrilled him while he dreamed them, but he noticed something no one had ever taught him to notice. When the dreams of glory faded, they left him dry, restless, empty. When the dreams of following Christ faded, the peace they brought stayed. Sit with that, brother, because it is one of the most important discoveries in the history of Christian prayer, and it was not made by a monk in a cloister. It was made by a wounded soldier reading the aftertaste of his own thoughts. God was speaking, not yet in visions, but in the difference between what drains a man and what fills him. Out of that sick room, observation would come, his rules for the discernment of spirits, and men and women have been using them to find the will of God for 500 years. The vain soldier got up off that bed converted. The limp came with him. In 1522 he left Loyola for good, and what he did next tells you he was still, in his bones, a soldier. A knight of that age kept a vigil of arms, a knight spent awake before an altar, weapons beside him, before he took up a new allegiance. Íñigo climbed the mountain of Montserrat, made a full confession of his life, gave his fine clothes to a poor man, put on a rough pilgrim's tunic, and then kept his vigil through the whole night, now kneeling, now standing, before the altar of Our Lady of Montserrat. And when morning came, he did not take his weapons up. He left them there. His sword and his dagger hung at the altar of the Mother of God. The vigil of arms inverted, a new king, a new service. The old weapons surrendered for good. Then came the hard schooling. In the town of Manresa, nearby, he stopped for what became nearly a year, begging his bread, praying up to 7 hours a day, much of it in a cave above the river. It was not a gentle year. He was assaulted by scruples, a crushing, circling doubt that God could ever have forgiven the man he had been, despair so fierce it frightened him. He held his post, he obeyed his confessor, and the darkness broke into the greatest clarity of his life. Praying beside the river Cardona, he received an understanding of God so deep that he said everything he learned in the rest of his life did not equal it. And there at Manresa, this man with no theology degree, a convert barely a year old, began writing notes on what God had done with him, what draws a soul, what drains it, how to examine a day, how to choose. Those notes became a small book, The Spiritual Exercises, one of the most influential manuals of prayer ever written by a Catholic hand. He went to the Holy Land in 1523, meaning to stay forever. The Franciscan custodians of the holy places, responsible for every pilgrim's neck, ordered him home. So he obeyed and faced the question every man faces when the dramatic plan dies, now what? His answer is one of the most quietly heroic decisions in the lives of the saints. Íñigo of Loyola, 33 years old, a veteran of battle, a man who had rallied a doomed garrison, sat down on a bench in Barcelona beside schoolboys to learn Latin grammar from the beginning. The man who wanted to save souls realized he knew nothing and was not ashamed to start where a child starts. It cost him. At the universities of Alcalá and Salamanca, this limping layman who spoke to people about prayer drew the attention of the Inquisition. An untrained man teaching spiritual things was exactly what they existed to examine. He was questioned, held, examined, and cleared every time. He did not rage at the church he loved. He drew the soldier's conclusion: get the training no one can question. So he walked to Paris and spent 7 years earning his degree at the greatest university in Europe. And in Paris, God handed him his men, his roommates, a gentle Savoyard named Peter Faber, and a proud Navarrese athlete named Francis Xavier, the hardest recruit of his life. Íñigo kept putting one question of Christ in front of him: what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? Xavier held out for years. Then he broke and became the greatest missionary since the Apostle Paul. On the 15th of August, 1534, in a small chapel on the hill of Montmartre, Íñigo, now calling himself Ignatius, and 6 companions vowed poverty, chastity, and to serve souls in Jerusalem, or, if that door closed, wherever the Pope would send them, 7 men, one of them a priest. That was the whole army. In 1540, Pope Paul III approved them as a religious order, the Society of Jesus, in a bull that capped them, cautiously, at 60 men. The cap did not survive contact with reality. The companions elected Ignatius the first superior general. He refused twice and accepted only under obedience. And then the old soldier fought his last campaign from a desk in Rome. 15 years, some 7,000 letters. When he died on the 31st of July, 1556, the 7 men of Montmartre had become about 1,000 Jesuits, running dozens of colleges across 3 continents, with Xavier gone ahead of him even in death, India, Japan, and a grave within sight of China. Tradition remembers the charge Ignatius gave him as he sent him east: go, set the world on fire. The church canonized Ignatius of Loyola in 1622. His feast is July 31st, a week from Friday. So what does a 16th century Basque soldier have to say to you? 3 things, and they are all drills. First, the cannonball is the door. Ignatius did not find God in his strength. God reached him through the wound that wrecked the plan, the shattered leg, the ceiling he stared at for months. Brother, you have a Pamplona, the job that ended, the marriage that nearly broke, the diagnosis, the failure you still will not say out loud. Ignatius is the patron of men who get a second start, and his life says the second start begins inside the wreckage, not after it is cleaned up. He limped to Paris. He limped to Rome. The limp came with the mission. Stop waiting to be unbroken. Second, watch the aftertaste. The discernment that built the Jesuits began with one flat-on-his-back observation. Some things thrill you and leave you empty. Some things cost you and leave you full. Run that test on your own evenings. The scroll, the lust, the third drink, the fantasy of being envied. How do you feel when it fades? Dry, restless. Now the prayer you almost skipped, the work done honestly, the hour on the floor with your kids. What does that leave behind? Peace that stays. That difference is not random, brother. That is God, speaking to you the same way he spoke to a soldier in 1521. Start reading it. Third, the Examen, the soldier's debrief. Ignatius gave his men one prayer he would not let even the busiest of them drop. A nightly review of the day before God. 5 steps. 10 minutes. Tonight. 1. Thank God for what he gave you today. Name it. 2. Ask for light to see the day as he saw it. 3. Walk back through it, morning to now. Where did you serve? Where did you fail? Where was he? 4. Ask forgiveness plainly for what needs forgiving. 5. Resolve tomorrow, with his grace, one concrete thing. That is a debrief, brother. Every soldier knows what a debrief is for, so tomorrow's fight goes better than today's. 5 nights this week. That is the assignment. He drove one phrase through his rule and through his letters, a motto his order carries to this day. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam, for the greater glory of God. Not some of it for God, all of it. The wound, the vanity burned away, the second start, the desk, the letters, the limp. Whatever your sword is, the thing you have gripped your whole life because it made you somebody, you know where he hung his. Altar, arms, allegiance. Subscribe, and next Tuesday, the story we owe you. An 11-year-old girl in an Italian farmhouse who, dying of her wounds, forgave the man who had struck her down and whose mercy dragged him, years later, to his knees. Saint Maria Goretti. And if you want the weekly Sanctum dispatch, one reflection, one discipline, one action for the coming week, the link is in the description. This Sunday's issue takes this episode's third drill, the Examen, and builds your week around it. Our Lady of the Rosary, pray for us. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Fight well, brothers.